Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for April 25th, 2025. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating. And also present are Thomas Howell and Ralph Kohler. Thomas, you have your hand up? Question?
I wanted to bring something up before you started the meeting. I apologize. So I'm just going to type it into the text chat for something I wanted to discuss later on before the end of the meeting.
Okay. So I just looked at the issue queue of issues tagged with needs usability review that are either needs review or RTBC. There's only one for Drupal core that needs review. The issue number is 3467947. Separate indexing settings from search pages. So I haven't looked at this before. But the admin page for the search module has a lot of settings on them. While connected, can cause confusion if they all live on the same page. Separating them would make the UX for sites that use search pages defined by contrib modules. I think that could use a rewrite. But assume the site being built is going to rely on a contrib search page like Google CSE. And the first three field sets, and maybe even the fourth, have zero bearing for your site and might confuse novice admins who may think it is a problem that the site is 0% indexed, even though that index has nothing to do with Google CSE search results. And there's a screenshot down here. So let me open the before screenshot. New tab. So administration, configuration, search and metadata, search pages. And the after image, is this all one image? No. But the after image is to have two separate pages, the first of which would be this one, which is currently at the bottom of the before screenshot, and the second of which would have the settings. So I guess separating status from settings. So let me see. I have, as usual, a Drupal site set up. I'll paste the link into the Zoom chat. And as usual, you can log in as admin. Since the issue mentions the Google CSE module, let me just install that. I'll do that in a window you can't see. Google CSE, yes. Google _ CSE. And let's see if we can see admin pages talking about in this issue. So configuration, search and metadata, search pages. So this is a somewhat large page. It has several sections which look like details, elements open by default. And the proposal is to break this large page up into a few sections. And oh, I see two things. Offer Shal has joined us, and Ralph has posted a link in Zoom chat.
Just one remark about that link. Somehow the navigation module brings up an error. I had to uninstall it and use the toolbar instead. So yeah, but the patch is applied and you'll see that there are 2 pages instead of 1. Configuration. Oh, yeah. Search and metadata.
Search pages, and we have search index settings. And I guess maybe if I go to the parent page, this is one of the screenshots. And I don't spend a lot of time administering search, but I can see that this is something that could be useful to have by itself. And then the settings page. Alt index settings, indexing throttle, indexing progress, and logging. Go ahead, Ralph.
Just one thought. I wonder if it would be an idea to instead of having 2 separate pages with 2 menu items, still keep a single page, a single menu item, and instead of 2 separate pages like it is in the current variant, go with basically a tabbed variant. So you have one tab for the search pages and one tab for the index settings. That way, the odds are higher that you don't miss one of the 2.
Okay, so you're suggesting instead of all these separate details element that we have 2 tabs or local tasks.
And not for every, but basically move the 2 pages that are created in that current page into 2 tabs.
Right.
I don't think it would make any sense to, for every field set, have a separate tab. That would be an overkill, but having those in 2 separate tabs might be an idea.
And that's a pattern that we see elsewhere. Can't think offhand where else, but we often have settings as a separate tab. Maybe it's more common in contrib modules.
Or on content types, for example. There it's currently called edit, but it's basically settings. So
Structure content types.
yeah. And if you go there into one and go to the edit tab, that is basically settings. As you can see, the vertical tabs are labeled as settings each, even so.
Settings, options, and settings.
Yeah.
Um, Let me just think, is there any place else where that pattern is especially used?
If you go to configuration, region, and language, and then languages, it's not necessarily settings there, but you have two tabs. One is list, and the other is basically settings for detection and selection.
Yeah, that's pretty close. And this uh, yeah, this page is a list of search pages. And that's good analog. So yeah, I think I like having the separate tabs. It makes it much easier to switch between the two. I did have a little bit of trouble. I had to open up some options in the toolbar to switch from one to the other. The other option is to go up in the breadcrumb and then back down, but having the tabs makes it very easy to switch between one and the other. So I think that's a good suggestion. And any questions or clarifications needed at this point? I usually like to pause and ask for questions before diving into making recommendations and such. And any other suggestions for improvement, or is this just a bad idea? Is it better to keep it all on one page? What do you think? Go ahead, Offer. Oh, I'm sorry, Thomas, I think.
Okay, I can go. Um, uh, the only thing I would say is when we were looking at the languages page, there's some instruction here. I think that how indexing works can be confusing for someone who doesn't know indexing. And yet, for search to function, that's a critical feature. So, while we're moving this to two tabs, it might make sense to consider what language is on the page. Like if we're trying to organize things, then the recommendation is that they may want to also consider, and I'm not saying that we have to come up with a language, but if they're trying to make this more usable, explaining what the tabs are, similar to how languages works, I would use that as a model.
So reconsider the interface text
Yep,
on
that's
these pages.
because if you're separating things out into two tabs and trying to make it more usable, they might want to take the opportunity to reconsider the text in the page, correct?
Yeah, and now that this page is a lot less cluttered, there's sort of room for some help text here. Whereas when it's one section of this very large page,
Hmm.
um, that gets more in the way.
It doesn't have to be a lot, but I think they could uh, provide enough information that they'll understand what they're looking at, and it's not without context.
Okay, you get a thumbs up from Ralph. Offer?
I like the idea of tabs. Yeah, I think it's a good progress, make things easier to find what else is related.
Okay. Um, and then one question I have, the indexing progress. I wonder if that really belongs on the settings or whether it belongs on the list. I mean, the indexing throttle, that's definitely a setting. Default indexing settings, That's settings. Logging, that looks like settings to me. But the indexing progress with this button to re-index the site, whatever that means. That's an action rather than a setting. It's also not a list. So I wonder if we are separating out into two separate tabs, where does this belong? Offer, did you want to reply to that, or is your hand just still up?
It might be a little unrelated, but yeah, and I'm just thinking that this page is full of like these accordion things, and I think it's like make it even more difficult if we're talking about finding what do I need to click, where is what I'm looking for. I think if we didn't use accordion, I think that would become more usable.
Okay, if we did not use an accordion?
Right. Like we have indexing progress and like we're hiding like one line, right? It's like all of them are collapsed, I believe makes it more difficult to know what I want. Many times I would use, yeah, like I would scan the page quickly, scroll up and down, or find what I need to know if I don't know already where it is. I thought like for these things that are not hiding so much when it's collapsed, that's where it becomes like a disadvantage.
Okay, you're getting a thumbs up from Thomas, but I think you joined after I first visited this page. And by default, all of these accordions or details elements were open by default.
Oh, okay.
I closed them so that I could more easily scroll.
Okay, that's better. Yeah.
Um,
And about what you said, I'm not sure what the last thing you mentioned about reindex and all that. Um, yes, we're asking if this is a setting or this is an action for search.
Right, so this particular section, the indexing progress and the button to reindex the site, um, I'm not sure whether that belongs with the settings or whether it belongs with the lists or whether it should have a separate tab all by itself.
Yeah, I often use search API, which is a contrib, and then I don't know how the relations between what we have in core and how search API does it. Um, and I don't know how popular is it when people use regular search that is not search API, because then they don't need this extra special server. Um, so I'm thinking that the interface there is a little bit different.
Yeah, I'm also using Search API on my current projects with Solar. Ralph, go ahead.
Um, I think I would move basically the indexing progress field set over to the search pages, because that way, on one hand, if you take a look at search pages, the page, not the setting, yeah, exactly the down there, you already see 19 of 19 indexed. The 93 of 93 index does not use index, for example, and if you're on a page that says index in progress 0 of 96 indexed, for example, and you have basically the action directly at hand on the very same page, right next to it, that way it would be way more straightforward from my perspective. And adding a third tab for the indexing, that way a user would have to go from the search pages page to from the search pages tab to the indexing tab, and that way it would be more cumbersome and one additional click.
But just to clarify how it works, when I reindex the site, that clears the index. 0% of the site has been indexed. And looking down here, we see zeros. When I go to the terminal window that you can't see and I trigger a cron job, and then reload the page, it's the cron job that does the indexing.
then just one follow up idea. Would it make sense as a follow up to, in addition to that, what's it called again? The re-index site button. Add another button that triggers the cron job.
There is this link. Where exactly does that go? That takes you to a page where you can run cron. So
We do not have I remember in Search API solo there's like an index now button. So in core search we don't have in the search realm to index.
apparently not. You can
And
you can run cron and that will do all of your cron tasks, and in particular it will run the indexing, but yeah, but if you
but
have a lot of content, it'll only do some of the indexing on each run, and it will not specifically do the indexing cron task.
just one additional note, then basically re-index site is sort of misleading. It's basically clear the index.
That's what
Yes.
reindex means.
Yeah, but my assumption when I read re-index, it means
Yeah,
for me
true.
actually creating, or going through the site and indexing everything again.
It's uh, I'm with you. I think it should be clear index because that is what the button does. It doesn't re-index.
Yeah, it's the cron jobs that do the reindex.
I mean, the way this is all interrelated, I I wouldn't move the reindex site button off of the throttle and everything else because that's all interrelated. And if we're switching to having things in two tabs, I think having the actual like searches on its own page and having all of the things related to indexing clearly listed as indexing elsewhere, and you can put that in the description at the top to direct people over. But if someone doesn't know what they're doing, they can trigger cron, and if they have more than 100 items, which is fairly frequent in at least small and medium-sized businesses, like they don't know why only 100 things have been indexed. And if you separate out into two tabs, you don't necessarily need the accordion the way it is. Like, I'm not a fan of the accordion because it's adding a lot of extra white space that's separating out things that are all interrelated. And so things end up below the fold, and it can be more difficult to understand the total context of what's happening here. Now, it might make sense to look at the Search API module and maybe mimic its interface so that you at least have parity between the two. But like putting the indexing button on the search page seems highly counterintuitive for me when you really need people to understand how many numbers of items are being indexed every time they run the cron job. And that isn't super clear from the way this is written. Because if someone put that down to 10 because they blew their site up once, then that means cron has to run for 100 items 10 times. If they have 1,000 items, then it has to run 100 times. And if you're running cron once an hour, that's 100 hours. So this is a really complex thing that can be highly confusing, and by default, the way it's set up, they need like the wording on index progress where it says only items indexed, like to me, it's not indicating to a non systems level person. So the help text only items just below the top of indexing progress. That doesn't say you must configure cron. And I know from my support days, many eons ago, there's a ton of people who do not even know what cron is. They don't know what a maintenance task is. And so the fact that this has to be set up for the search to work isn't clear. This seems optional rather than required. And so, like, just moving that button isn't enough to make this a more usable site for a non sysadmin level experienced individual.
Okay. Um, I think it's getting out of scope of the current issue, but I think it would be more useful to be able to run cron from this page, or even more to run just the search cron from this page. Ralph?
Just one additional question. When reading that, to me, it's not really clear what is basically an item. Number of items to index. That is also just to taking the perspective of a non-technical person, and
Maybe in the context of this, content and help. Like this section doesn't use the generic term item, so maybe that doesn't help. But
so is it basically an item is in case of the page type content, a node is one item and a help page would be an item?
I believe so.
Okay.
Oh, it's kind of funny that these edit buttons have different widths. I assume that there's options that are longer. Yes, set as default is what governs the width. So I guess we have some disagreement. Yeah, in general, I sort of like details elements. I like being able to collapse the things that I'm not looking at. And maybe just look at the indexing progress and the search pages. And maybe maybe we should have a separate issue to provide additional options in the indexing progress, because if I'm looking at this and it's not 100% indexed, if I have 15 of 19 nodes are indexed and 35 of 93 help topics are indexed, what I want to do is get them indexed, which I can do by running cron. But how hard would it be to add a second button, and maybe add a default button to well, you wouldn't want to use this as the interface text, but to run search cron, to index more items, and then reindex the site should be sort of a secondary button. So I think that's out of scope for the current issue, but if we did have that, then would it make more sense to combine this indexing progress section with the list of search pages? Go ahead, Thomas.
One thing that might help people is if you had a button that was had an appropriate warning on it, but said uh, cron like force index all. That would help for people who didn't understand how this all worked. So that if they had 103 things and they could never figure out why they only got 100 out of the 103 indexed, because they never set up cron, they would at least be able to index everything. Like there's a lot of idiosyncrasies to how this all works that is not readily clear. And that's why putting these buttons and the reindexing on a separate page than the indexing throttle is separating out a key limiter away from the indexing. So if they don't have cron running and they go to the cron maintenance task and they hit the button to force cron manually, that's only ever going to index whatever the indexing throttle is set to. And that isn't necessarily clear to someone.
So there is the text saying that you should configure a cron maintenance task, and if you don't know what that means, you can click on that and maybe find out. There is this confirmation page. I just blindly push the button, but if you actually read it, it does tell you what's happening. Searching will continue to work. New content won't be indexed until all existing content has been re-indexed.
But that doesn't say anything about the throttle.
No.
And that there is no clear connection if you separate these to different tabs, that these are intimately related to one another. And if you go to the link that for cron, if you go to the top and you look at the link for cron maintenance task,
Here?
yeah, if you go to that page, there is a run cron button. But what
Yes.
you've done is you haven't made it clear to them that it's only doing whatever the throttle is set to. And even if we put the run cron on the same page, it's still limited by the throttle. So just pretend that was, rather than 100, was 10. We have more than 10 pages. This does not make it clear that you're only going to index 10 when you hit that cron button. And when you click reindex site, it's going to clear everything out and you're going to do 10 and 10 and 10 and 10. And the reindexing site, yeah, anyway, separating it is a bad idea from my perspective.
So what if we had a button that said index more, and you click on it, and then the confirmation button comes up and it says 10 items added to the index. To configure the threshold, go to the settings page. Would that work for you?
I don't know. I mean, I pointed out my concern. I think that if the three of you are adamantly for separating them, then yeah. I recall so it's better to use Search API. Like the core Drupal search is not always reliable, at least when I was using it, and that was a long time ago. I just know that this confuses people. It confused me for a very long time. Like I preferred to set up Solar because if I went through the instructions for Search API or before Search API, just the Search Solar module, like just following those instructions got me a site that worked. Whereas search pages can like get blocked by nodes they try to index in certain circumstances, and it's not clear that you're blocked on that indexing and yada yada yada. Like search can be really messy and difficult to understand. But if you guys feel the button belongs on the front page, I will table my concerns. And your suggestion might be one way of addressing my concerns. I just don't know that it clearly addresses it.
Okay. Ralph, what do you want to say?
Um, I've thought about it, and I guess I redraw my suggestion with moving the indexing progress over to the search pages tab, based on Thomas's points. And also, I'm not really noticed that the status of the index is already shown on the indexing progress with 100% of the site has been indexed. That was not apparent to me directly. It slipped through somehow. And one thought about Thomas's point about the throttling, I think for one, having basically that help text with pointing to the cron maintenance task is not an action. It's just a for your information. It's not a clear action. But if you would have a drop the index button that currently called re-indexed site, and then a index the site button, and how about like for the drop the index button, there you have a confirmation page, also have a confirmation page for that indexing button, and says and that is contextually aware of basically that setting, meaning you have for the site, you know the number of items available, and you on the other hand know the setting of the numbers of the index throttling. And then if, for example, if it's set to 100 and you have, let's say, 10,000 items, then the confirmation page says running cron would be 1 out of 7 or 10 or 20 necessary rounds of cron jobs that has to be run until the index is completely rebuilt, something like that. Or then maybe on that page either do a single run or the option, shall we run several the number of necessary rounds, something like that, in a row. Oops.
Yeah, I think I think that that's a good suggestion. I was originally suggesting adding more text with the new button, but making a confirmation page gives you a way that you don't have to have that all of that text present all the time, but when you press on the add to index button, you get all of those details. You can have a link to the settings page and so forth.
And so that you're basically aware of the implications of your choice and what is necessary. And it's definitely a more than valid point Thomas brought up with the indexing throttle and the need that you have to run cron more than one time. And to make that explicit in a confirmation page, I think might be a viable approach.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. So let's see, we have less than 10 minutes left. I guess our recommendation for now is to do basically what the issue says, but instead of separate pages with separate entries in the admin menu. So I guess here I'm looking at
The old version.
without the patch. Instead of having these separate issues in the admin menu, to have one entry in the admin menu and then 2 tabs on the resulting page. And consider as a follow-up issue to add a button, well, relabel this one. Re-indexed site is not clearly describing what it actually does. something like clear the index or clear index, and then to add a second button on the search page listing, which, by the way, why do we have a save configuration button here? Settings needs that. But I'm not sure what the function of this button is here. I'm sorry, I'm being a little scattered here. I'm trying to summarize and I'm bringing up a new question.
Doesn't it save the order of content help users since they're
Yeah.
trackable?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. But that, of course, brings up the question, what difference does this make? I guess if you go to search user, if you go up in the breadcrumbs, just search, then you have this order, but the default is still determined. Okay. So there's both the order of the three elements and which one is chosen by default if you just go to search. If you go to search, you're redirected to search/node because node is the default. And that's what we were noticing before, that this one is enabled as the default, and that's why its button is a little narrower than the others. Okay, so the save configuration button does have a purpose. The order makes a difference. So for now, I think we just recommend that they use tabs rather than two separate pages. Yes. Thumbs up from Ralph and from Thomas. And let's see, has there been much discussion on the issue? I had some screenshots, a bunch of comments on the merge request. So I don't see a lot of actual discussion on the issue. There's some discussion on the merge request. But I don't see, for example, any discussion of whether to use tabs or separate pages. It's always a good idea to make sure that the recommendation we plan to make is not something that has already been discussed and rejected. Okay. I'm happy to make a comment on the issue unless someone else wants to do that.
Benji, just one note I've posted in the chat. Aside the tabs, I think it might be also within the scope Thomas's point of adding a help text to the search pages tab.
You're right. That is something we discussed and agreed that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So use tabs and add some information here. Okay. Oh, and we just have a couple of minutes left, but Thomas did post a link early in the issue about the Starshot initiative.
It was Yeah, related to the like theme marketplace. And I just would love to discuss if there's anything we might want to contribute as a usability community. Because if I had one major complaint about Drupal to this day, is that the default theme isn't usable for like any of the use cases I've had out of the box. And it's very, very difficult to really work with themes if you don't do themes. Like people who, and so this sounds very attractive to me, but I'd want to make certain that it's usable. And so to me, this is something that I'd love us to weigh in on if anyone else has opinions and stuff we want to talk about.
Um, so for the sake of the recording, it's www.drupal.org/about/starshot/marketplace-initiative. And I'm sorry, what theme are you talking about?
I'm just talking about theming, period.
Theming in general. And
It's been my pain point since I joined with Drupal 6. So I don't know if this is going to be like what this means from a community perspective, but having opinions, if we have any, would be nice.
so go ahead.
Just wanted to ask, is there already any material available or anything to discuss yet? Or is that just in the ideation stage at this point?
As far as I can tell, it's in the ideation stage right now.
Okay.
There's a section, what's happening now? The working group has been asked to explore the opportunity, engage the ecosystem, and decide by DrupalCon Vienna whether to go ahead with it.
And we're like UX to me is like, is this something that would improve the usability of Drupal as a tool? And I'm really interested in what other people have to say, because it may be an issue of I struggle with the documentation and finding ways of dealing with how the sites look. Like that for me, it's the most dated part of working with Drupal. I still have used other tools and I love everything else about Drupal, but I struggle to make it look good. And if this helps address making it look good, then that would address for me a key usability issue.
Making look good to what, like a theming part, or
Yes,
what
I
do you
mean to me it's like to so we recently built a website and we ended up just modifying the core default theme. I forget what it's called, but we just made some CSS modifications via the module that we installed, because the assumptions it made broke a lot of things for us. And I spent a week trying to use searching for community themes, like going through the community page, and it was a very painful experience. And I was unsuccessful. So what we ended up with is just a very kind of hacked solution. So solving theming for Drupal for even someone who's experienced would be really nice, because I think people who know themes, it's probably a very simple problem to solve. And so I just don't know how to address it.
I think I know themes, and I wouldn't think it's. I'm still looking for, like, if I need to create a new site today, what would be my go-to to make it easy for me, that I think I
Yeah.
know what to do. And I don't think that there is an answer yet. My favorite, by the way, is, even that it wasn't recommended, is take Olivero and work from there, because at least I know the HTML written really well, and then I have small modifications otherwise.
Yeah. But I just remember looking at things and being like, why is this margin this way? And I don't know. And I'm hoping the marketplace encourages solving for me what is a key use case. And usability folks have been brilliant. And I think that if this takes off, making certain that we have opinions, if we have them and they're heard, could be very useful. I could also be very, very wrong, and I may just be dumb. And so I'm very open to being told, like, stay in your lane, stop like messing about. But I think like this group in particular has made very astute observations about how things work in the past.
Okay, well, we're a few minutes over, and that's a big subject. But yeah, I think it would be worth looking at to see if we can make recommendations.
Thank you, Benji.
Thank you all for coming, and see you next week.
Thank
Get
you.
a thumbs up from Ralph.
See you guys. Have a good week.
Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.